Friends, I wanted to show you, I was sitting here playing with my Dagger brush a bit. This is actually the Princeton Neptune, which is very soft, 1/4 inch. And they're kind of fun, so I thought I'd just show you some of the different things I can do with this brush. Let me go into, I've got my Paul Rubens, my lanes here. Let's go into blue, because that's what I've got a lot of here in my palette. And let me just show you some of the fun things you can do with that Dagger brush. So I'm just loading it here. Again, the Neptune, very soft, very flexible. With the softer the brush, the more paint it's going to pick up. So the first thing that is really fun about a Dagger brush is because of that edge, boy, you can get a chisel fine edge. Look at that. I mean, that is really, really precise and small. I can get thicker and thicker the more pressure. So I'm holding it with the slanted edge down and the pointed edge out. So I'm not holding it flat, I'm holding it like this. But you can use that same approach that I show you with a round brush, which is point, press, point. So point, press, I'm pressing into that belly for a compound stroke. Point, more pressure, less pressure. So you can make these nice little brush strokes that you can use for leaves and flowers. But where I don't typically use this for petals. What I use it for is, let me show you. By the way, look at how thick you can get it if I hold it more on its side and bring it this way. You can get a really nice thick brush stroke. So you could use that for water, for a background. You could get a really chiseled edge for, say, a mountain. Now I'm doing a blue mountain, but look at that. So you can get a real chiseled edge with that, which is really, really nice. Let me just soften out that line there for no other reason than I like a soft line. So that could be a really pretty mountain scene. You could use this for individual blades of grass. Just keeping it on its side, that chisel stroke, using those thin lines so you can get these grass pieces, which is awesome. Just like that. You can, let's see, what else can we do? Of course, leaves has always been my favorite with this brush because you can just do so many great leaves. Let me show you. So you've got, I'm loading my brush, tap, 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 and here's our stem. And then actually, let me go in. I'm gonna rinse my brush and pick up some green. Tap, tap, tap. And then using the tip, that beautiful point, to tap in, and then I slide my brush to the side. Look at that perfect little leaf. Point, press to the side, point, I mean, I can just make these all day long. Point, press, point, press, all kinds of fun leaves. Point, press, so easy. The more I press down, the more I can get that width in there as well. Another really fun way to use these any type of angle brush or filbert brush, Dagger brush like this, is you can dip one side, this is really fun, one side into the blue. So I've got blue here, and then I'm going to put the other side, the short edge, into my green. Now watch this. Point, press, point, press. Let me add a tiny bit more blue. Point, press, and you get this beautiful, it's hard to see in this one. Let me add a little bit more of that blue. Point, press, there we go. Now you can see that blue and the green. Let's use a little bit more contrasting colors so you can see better. I'll go into, let's go into our green. I've got my green in a different palette here. There we go. Just scrape off some of that, rinse my brush a bit. So I'm going to go into my, either one, it doesn't really matter, with the tip of my brush. And then I'll go in and fill the bottom of my brush with that green so you can see it a little bit better. So point, looky there. Isn't that gorgeous? Point, press. So you get this ombre effect. So pretty, right? Another, you could do a 2-stroke leaf. So let's practice that. I'll go into the tip of my brush with that yellow ochre, and then I'm kind of running out of paint there. And then it's kind of harder to get in your palette this way. Oop. Let me try going in here again. I just want to get that short edge, and you can do a 2-stroke leaf. So point, press, come up on the tip, and then let's do the other side. Point, press, come up on the tip. Look at that fun leaf. One of the things I used to do in the evenings that I really loved and got me to fall in love with this brush is I would do, and this was so relaxing to me, is I would go in, I'm just gonna use one color right now, and I would do these long flowing leaves. Point, press, and you just flow, and I would put on my music, point, press. Look at that. The more pressure I put, the wider it's going to get. So you can do that, you know, however wide you want that to be. Let me go in and pick up a little bit more paint. There we go. That's pretty thick, so I'll add a little bit more water. Tap, 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 and just keep going. Point, press, point, press. So I'm dragging it on its side. For the thin strokes, I'm keeping it on its edge. For the wider strokes, thin stroke and then push to the side. If you want the other side of that, point, push to the side, and look at that beautiful leaf. Isn't that so fun? There's another little leaf that's really fun as well. Let me grab a little bit lighter pink. So I hope this is kind of inspiring you to play with that dagger brush for your leaves. Here's another little leaf I used to do quite a bit. Just laying down my brush. You can even move it back and forth, but I really don't like to rub against the leaf too much, and then I could add in a little bit more. And then I'll go into the center. Let me pick up some of that blue. Ooh, look at that. I could add some of that blue to the edges and let it mix in. I could go in with maybe some yellow ochre. Tap, tap, tap. Because you don't need a lot of water because you're going into wet and wet. So this is really a fun little brush. I don't use it much for my florals. There are ways you can do it. So point, press, just a little leaf here, point, press. Let's go this way, point, press, point, press. There are some, simple flowers. The way I have used a dagger, let me show you this. I'll grab that blue paint and let me rinse this off. Here's my blue, and this is actually really fun. One second here, I've got a little bunny in our yard saying hello to me. So you could go into this for a flower. I've used these dagger brushes for my hydrangeas, and if you have the center of your flower right here, what I would do is, again, I'm on the edge and point, and then keeping the tip of my brush there, I'm turning my brush sideways. Now, what I feel like I want to do there is I'm going to go in with a purple when I'm done. So keeping the tip of my brush there, pivoting my brush. So it's almost like a little windmill. Point, turn my brush. Oop. Point, turn my brush. So it's like this rotating. And I've used this a lot on my hydrangeas. The other thing that's fantastic is, boy, that point right there is really great for a tiny dot. Let me pick up a little bit of purple to drop in the center there. So I've got my laying palette, loading my brush from the side because I want to protect that beautiful tip there. And let's just, ooh, look at that. Is that a beautiful hydrangea leaf? Then I could go in here, point press. If you've done privates with me and things like that, this is the technique I probably showed you. And then you can even use the side of that brush or the point of that brush to go around. Something like that. So I wanted to share this with you. Look at the beautiful blend. Because, boy, if you're not using this little brush, you're really missing out. Let's even go back to this and add in. So here's our mountain landscape. Rinsing my brush, gonna go in there again, but I'm gonna add just a little bit darker blue. And I'm gonna go in and create another mountain range. Look at the chisel edge I've got there. Just using the side of my brush and then rinsing my brush and going in and creating that wash coming out. So look at that. Isn't that fantastic? Let me go in one more time and darken the tip of that mountain range up while it's wet. Oh, so pretty, isn't it? Now, once this dries, I could go in and even add in some little grasses. Let me show you. I can give that a quick shot, 1 second, with my heat gun. There we go. And now I can go in and use this fun, handy little brush. And let's go into a dark color. So I'll pick up some of my Van Dyke brown, maybe a little black, and put it into my palette here. Here we go. Here's a really dark color. And you've probably seen me do this technique in other tutorials, but watch this. So now look at how dramatic, you guys. And if I just want to use the very tip, I can do that. Isn't that fun? Let's go over here. So quite a few uses for this little brush. Definitely get in there and play. See what you can do with it. I'm going to keep going here. And I always love a brush that I can get a thick brush stroke and a thick brush stroke. Go in, maybe just soften up the bottom there. Just like that. And look at that simple little landscape, all with one brush. These thick brush strokes, these thin brush strokes. And don't forget the double loading, because that is a really fun technique. I love it. And that was one of the things I really originally, now this ran quite a bit, but that was one of the first things that I fell in love with this brush, is that ability to double load. So loading the bottom edge of the dagger with one color and the tip with another, and then creating these beautiful, flowy, gorgeous leaves. Point press, point press, and you know, you can do those small leaves too. I just tend to make them really long and flowy. Point press, point press, point press, point press. So you can do little short leaves as well. I just tend to make them a little bit thicker. All right, everybody, I hope that gives you some ideas. Get out those dagger brushes. I have one coming out in my subscription box, by the way. And we're going to have some fun with that. I will link this one down below. Again, this is the Neptune, which is very soft. So a little bit different to paint with, and they're 1/4 inch Princeton. All right, everybody, have fun, happy playing. Thanks so much for being here. Let's keep just discovering and experimenting with our brushes, and I will see you soon. I'll be right here reminding you, you are an artist.